What if we told you the best tablet you can buy right now doesn't actually cost a fortune, has a snappy display, a powerful processor, and costs less than £1,000, euros, or dollars? Well, that's the Samsung Tab S10 FE, and this is not a stripped out version of a high-performing tablet. In fact, it does so much more, including offering IP68 dust and water resistant. So let's talk more about the S10 FE. So let's touch on the other key specs of the S10 FE. You get a 10.9-inch 90Hz LCD display, which is super punchy and bright and great for consuming content. On top of that, the tablet itself weighs less than 500 grams. So it's actually really lightweight and it's well built with an aluminium frame. On top of that, you get Android 15, One UI 7 as well. And then based on the variant you buy, you can get 12 gig of RAM and 256 gigabytes storage with the option of extending it via an SD card as well. But then that display, super punchy at 90 Hz, 10.9 inch, and in pixels, it is 1440 by 2304 pixels to be exact. Now you really see the benefit of here when you are actually using this on the day-to-day around the OS, for example. So if you're in multiple windows at the same time, you get a super quick responsive touchscreen, and the OS works very, very well. So if you're opening and closing apps, very responsive. And then if you're navigating between different menus or different applications using multitasking, again, super smooth and super punchy. And then if you're watching content on here, couple of provisos. This is not an AMOLED display, so where you're going to get those deep, rich, inky blacks and super contrasting colors, you're not going to have that on an LCD panel. But on top of that, there's no support for HDR10 Plus or Dolby Vision as well, which is a bit of a shame. But the good points on the S10 FE are that it works very, very well as a content consuming device. You get an 8,000 mAh battery with 45 watts of charging as well, so this can go longer for more. And when you're watching content here, you do actually get really good representation of colors. So it's well balanced, easy to watch. And if you just navigate the menus or reading a book on here, it is a super pleasant experience. In terms of OS support, you get 7 OS updates on here. So this mirrors the phones, flagship and non-flagship alike. So 7 years of OS support as well, which is awesome. This includes security updates as well. But moving on past that, the operating system itself, Android 15, One UI 7. Now, when it comes to AI, you do get Gemini built in. So holding down the power key gives you access to the prompts, or you can go into Gemini Live or share the camera itself to search in a more visual way. That works very, very well. One of the downsides in the OS on this particular tablet, which is a bit of a shame compared to the flagship tablets, are that you don't get the full version of Galaxy AI. This is a stripped out version. In fact, you have to search this within the settings to find it, called intelligence features. Now, you don't get things like being able to create notes and summarize and annotate, etc. That doesn't exist. But what it does have is a couple of cool features. So you do get object eraser on here. So if you've taken a photo and you want to erase people from the background so you can get it looking super clean, or you want to remove objects from a photo, which is sort of interrupting the image, you can do that very, very well. The other component of it is, though, that intelligence features do somewhat live in the operating system itself, and that is through things like the pen usage. So if you're using the pen on the daily to draw or annotate or just sketch, it'll do a really good job of recognizing, for example, if you've drawn a circle, to then fill it into an actual circle by holding it down, squares, lines, etc. But you can actually go into a sub menu and put on maths mode, which will actually help solve mathematical equations. And we've put some random equation together here, and it's instantaneous and changes over super quickly. So the pen combined with the OS does a very, very good job. It may not have all of the AI features you'd expect, things like notes, interpreter, etc. But what it does have is super usable and super functional. So the performance of the S10 FE is powered by the Exynos 1580. Now, before you turn off your camera and think, I don't want to know what's going on here, hold on. So when you actually run this through extreme testing on Antutu, you'll find it does amazing in managing its thermals. So it doesn't throttle its thermals, but what it will do, it'll maintain a really good cooling range as well. So it's not going to get overly hot in terms of degrees of temperature up. And when you're using the tablet itself, it works very, very well. This is sort of a MIDI high-ish processor in the range, and it ranks that way on Antutu's benchmark. But when you're using it for things like gaming, you're going to get a great experience. So here on Call of Duty Mobile, we have graphics set as max, and then frame rate set as very high. And what you have here is a super intuitive, brilliant gaming experience where it works very, very well Does require you to download a lot of the assets to be able to perform on this high level, but when you're gaming on here, it works very, very well. Super punchy, not any issues with things like drop frame rates or any jitters, etc. And then the millisecond in terms of its response, again, is very, very small. We don't have the option on here to actually check to see what FPS is, but when you set up the game, it gives you the option to put into performance mode at 90 Hertz. So you probably get a really good experience over 50 frames, possibly close to 60 based on how many times you've played this game. We're comfortably getting 60 frames per second. So if you're looking for it as a gaming machine on its own, it works very, very well. Let's touch quickly on the performance aspect when it comes to its battery life, and we're living within this frame. You get an 8,000 mAh battery and it'll recharge at 45 watts. Now that may not sound extremely rapid or a large battery, but it does perform very, very well. You get over 12 plus hours of watch time on video, including being able to stream music, browse, etc. But what I would say is, again, referring back to the Antutu benchmark we mentioned at the start of this performance section, is the usage when it comes to battery usage is actually very, very, very small. It's almost irrelevant how much battery is used running that extreme test. Now, one of the downsides I would say of the Samsung S10 FE at that price point, around $499 roughly, it's RRP here in the UK, it sits next to the OnePlus Pad 3 that we reviewed, and that was an insane tablet, quad speakers, Snapdragon 8 Elite, 16GB of RAM, 512GB of storage. That tablet is the performance benchmark for us in terms of what we've used, and sitting at this price point, I would say the Pad 3 is a better overall buy. However, the performance of the S10 FE is no slouch. It just doesn't meet the requirements of the Pad 3 when you're looking at the price comparison. So the Samsung Tab S10 FE offers a compelling overall package in terms of what it offers for that $499 price point. And in fact, we're talking about price. If you shop reasonably well online, you could probably pick this up close to $399 for the 8GB 128GB storage option. And for that, it is super, super compelling, because what you have on here is a really good display, really well built, full S Pen support. The AI features may be lacking, and then the OS and the 90Hz display work incredibly well. So the downsides here are very small. We mentioned IP68 dust and water resistance as well. So even if you were to get in contact with any water or moisture or dirt, you're going to be covered off. I would say the only downside of this entire tab would probably be two things. We've already mentioned that chipset is definitely not as powerful as one on the Pad 3. So price would be one thing for sure, and then the other thing would be the LCD display, and maybe to extend the borders on the display itself. But other than that, the S10 FE is a really great buy. If you can get it sub 500 for around 400, 450, it's an easy recommendation, especially when you look at longevity and how good Samsung has been in supporting these tablets. But let us know in the comment section your thoughts on the Samsung Tab S10 FE. Is this something you would buy, or would you default for a more budget-friendly tablet, something like the Honor Pad X9A or Redmi Pad 2, just to get the job done, and you want to save that extra £250 to £300? Let us know in the comment section. Until the next one, as always, we out.